2024 was a wallop of a year. It was so hectic that your memory of it is probably mostly for the last 2 months flashbanging you with plotline after plotline. Seriously, they were getting a lot of story setup shoved in this final hour, and a lot of the stuff they were doing can really make you feel like the doomsday clock is about to hit midnight. So I wanted to take a look back at some of the things that I enjoyed this year. It's very easy to point out the things that made me think everything was over, but what about the things I like? You know, stuff that happened to me, things that were released this year that I enjoyed, or just generally unfolded for us to witness and were fun to look at. And honestly, I think this was probably a good idea. Making this list made me realize just how much good stuff I was lucky enough to experience this year, both in my personal life and with my consumer brain. It helped as a reminder of how, in retrospect, how little time there was between things that I distinctly cherished the memory of. And that is a lesson I am trying to carry forward into the next year, and I reckon you should try and do the same, maybe? Listen, there's always going to be time for being a doomer later. For now, give me your list of your favorite things you did this year or last year in the comments. And let me know if any of what I had in here resonated with you. Also, only 20% of y'all are subscribed with notifications on. I have a lot of exciting stuff coming in 2025, not just with YouTube, but in a lot of shit I am looking forward to trying. So be sure to sub and hit that bell icon so you don't miss it. Anyways, let's jump in. The first thing I want to shout out is my trip to Memphis, Tennessee in January. I feel like a lot of people have negative opinions of Memphis, but truthfully, there is a lot of really cool history to the place, and I genuinely enjoyed my time there, even if I spent most of that time inside the Bass Pro Pyramid. You know, that's a pretty important detail I probably should have led with. At the tail end of 2023, going into 2024, I had been spending months straight researching and doing my best to document as close to it as I could get the complete history of the Memphis Pyramid, currently known as the Bass Pro Pyramid. It started as a stadium. Mike Tyson had a fight in it. The founder of Hard Rock Cafe welded a crystal skull on the roof. It's not important for this. If you want to know more, go check out the full video. But basically, me and my buddy Joko traveled there in late January to record that video, and we took refuge in the Cypress Lodge, a hotel inside the Bass Pro Pyramid that offers screened-in porch views of the artificial swamp inside. Like, objectively, it was something I knew existed, but actually experiencing it is weird as hell. None of the research really prepares you for what being inside it is actually like. The ceiling is ridiculously high to the point where if you look straight in front of you, you just won't see the roof. And I remember waking up every morning with the curtains open to the swamp, where the view just genuinely looked like a swamp in the middle of the night because of how dark it was. Every time it happened, I was convinced I'd accidentally woken up in the middle of the night and that I needed to get back to bed to be ready for a day of filming. I checked my phone just to see if my alarm was set and realized it was actually 10 a.m., not 3. It was confirmed that it was daytime when I realized that I could hear the sounds of toddlers screaming. It meant that the Bass Pro Shop was open for business. There's a certain unreality that comes with being inside something so vast that it feels like you're in the outdoors when really you're just in a microcosm of the Truman Show. A building like the Bass Pro Pyramid is like the type of landmark I think you can say is uniquely American. You do not find those in Europe. I don't think a single Bass Pro Shop exists in Europe. Over there you have a bunch of like incredibly impressive historical architecture and just a lot of rich community. But the Bass Pro Pyramid is a product of the unique social fabric of the US, and I find every inch of it worth considering. There's so much to it, and a lot of the footage I captured never got used. You see, January when I went is the off-season for the pyramid, so it's the least busy, the least amount of people are staying there. And as a result, me and Joko got to snoop around the pyramid in the middle of the night almost unbothered. Except we actually did get caught by an employee once, and caught is the wrong word. Like, we weren't anywhere we weren't allowed to be. We were just walking around at night in giant empty halls, which is gonna make anybody feel like you're doing something wrong even when you're completely fine. The thing is, the person that caught us ended up being one of the chillest dudes around, and they let us inside every expensive hotel suite in the pyramid. That way I could record B-roll since no one was staying in them. I've gotten so much footage I've never gotten to use. Some of it's probably playing here. Maybe I'll do like a Kwite with a Y video on it. Getting that footage was genuinely pure luck. And that whole project taught me a lot about how to tell a long story in a linear fashion. It was like only my second long-form video, and the only thing I'd made like it before was the iceberg. But that video was a bunch of smaller subjects compiled together to make a monster of a video. Telling one story for an hour and a half all the way through was like something something I'd never done before. I'm still incredibly new to making big projects like that one, but I feel like every mistake I make on them is something new I learned about my creative process, and not just for the big stuff, but also something I can take into my everyday videos. And my final takeaway from that trip was on my last day in Memphis on the way to the airport, I gained a very interesting story to tell. You see, my Uber to the airport that we were taking, it distinctly asked us if we had been to the cookie shop where the rapper Young Dolph had been shot. Rest in peace, but who starts a conversation like that? No, obviously I hadn't. I told them as much, and they decided, not trust, you gotta see this. They took an exit off the highway that absolutely did not go to the airport, and they drove us to the fucking cookie shop. They were like, oh yeah, there's a memorial inside. You can get out of the car and go check it out if you want, take some pictures. I'm not gonna fucking do that. And to be fair, we were already late for our flight. So I'm like, listen, I appreciate the help, but we're already running late. And then we got to the airport, but that actually happened. I'm not kidding. Ask Choco. Now, in February was the first album release I got really into this year, Scrapyard by Quidecca. If you don't know Quidecca, he's an artist I've been following for the better part of a decade now, and whose artistic journey has been incredibly rewarding to watch. I originally found him when I was 18 because he made a KSI diss track. That was genuinely the first song I had ever heard from him, and it sounds like a YouTube diss track of the era, just better than those usually are. And I'd be lying if I said I was immune to that sort of thing. I ate that shit up back in the day. The beat on God Church by Ricegum is still a banger. I stand by that. The thing is with Quidecca, he had like a quite extensive catalog of music before all this. He wasn't the cursed archetype of a YouTuber who decides to rap like I am. To me, he always seemed more like a dude who raps and makes music and is using YouTube to get his voice heard. Like, you can tell where his priorities lie. He produced his own beats, his content was showing that he was a stylistic chameleon, and he could convincingly recreate the sounds and flows and styles of dozens of other artists, and he first made it into my playlist with his album From Me to You. That was an almost completely self-produced album with just disgusting industrial beats and conceptual tracks that showed Quidecca as a fucking powerhouse of a producer. Literally, I would say up there with some of the industry's best. He was doing crazy shit on that album. I'm more fond of that album than most, though I wasn't all the way on board yet, but it saw Quad genre blending in a way I hadn't seen him do before, and his streak continued with a song he released called I Wasn't Born Yesterday in 2022. That exponentially expanded on his production chops. It also had some of the most heart-wrenching vocal performances of that year.
And I'd be free if I just saved the day. With you right now.
It might be my favorite song that came out in 2022, dead serious. And it was the lead single to his next album, I Didn't Mean to Haunt You, an honest-to-God posthumous concept album. If you don't know, posthumous albums are projects released after an artist has died. I Didn't Mean to Haunt You is that in the most literal way possible. It's a classic, though insanely produced record surrounding the grief and pain of losing a loved one. Except this time, it's told from the perspective of the ghost of the guy who died as he witnesses his family grieve his death, but ultimately make peace and move on as he's forced to watch. It features Danny Brown, one of my favorite rappers of all time, rapping from the perspective of carbon monoxide. The goddamn Sunday service choir was on that bitch. It's in my top 10 for that year as well. I have it on vinyl. Twice, actually. It's that good. But moving on to Scrapyard, truth be told, I'd heard most of the songs in this thing before this year. Scrapyard was originally a collection of EPs Quidecca was releasing of unreleased tracks in 2023, but he ended up combining them into a mixtape with a few extra songs added that added up to a full-length project. And I don't know what to tell you. This album is technically a bunch of standalone vignettes, but as songs, they feel like they have a really strong connective tissue, whether intended or not. They all cut me to the bone emotionally, one way or the other. A la carte has to be the most beautiful song about awkward sex I've ever heard. Guess Who is one of the best, glitchiest bangers of the year. Way Too Many Friends makes you reconsider basically everything you've ever done socially. I Made It Look Effortless should be 40 minutes long instead of just one. Texas Blue with Kevin Abstract is predictably incredible, and it led to Quidecca performing at fucking Coachella. He recently announced his next album will be called Vanisher, and believe me when I say I will be there. I'll be first in line for the vinyl, Quad did. Okay, moving on. March through May, and honestly June, and really the rest of the year is utterly dominated by one thing that you can probably already guess, and will probably go into next year as well. I've already covered it on 2 separate occasions on this channel, and I won't be stopped from doing it a third time, but I want to do do a few unrelated highlights from the months first. I got invited to attend Webcon in late March in Dallas, Texas as an official guest. It was like my first in-person meet and greet in like 5 years, and the first one I'd ever done where it was like in an official capacity with the convention at all. Any meet and greet I'd done before them was like, hey guys, I'm gonna be at this random park in LA with like 5 other blokes, I guess. Not organized at all. Don't do that if you're an up-and-coming creator. Very stupid. I even managed to finesse the cardboard cutout of myself from the event, which is like half the size of all the other ones because I have no legs. You might notice that I look weirdly, polygonal in this thing, and that's because, in case you couldn't notice, it's a VTuber model. Yeah, I've been one of those for like almost 4 years now. I've been doing it since like early 2021, but 2024 was really the year where I got into it per se, as in like I really tried to engage and get out of my boundaries more, and it was my first time meeting a lot of my friends in the space for real at Webcon. And I gotta say, unabashedly, some of the coolest people I've ever met. And by complete coincidence, that weekend was my birthday, but it was just genuinely incredible. Probably like one of my favorite events of the year, if not my favorite. It just made me really appreciate the space I've been allowed to occupy as a dude coming into VTubing from the outside, because it's a really fucking cool medium, dude. Some of the shit they are doing over there is insane. Shout out Cottontail, Joel, Thaf9, Cabal, Giga. There really is like too many of you to name, and like this was in no particular order. There's just a ton of people in that space who made this year really special for me. All right, stalling's over. You know the type of autism I've been on all year. Other than Shadow the Hedgehog, it's Kendrick versus Drake. It was going to be unavoidable for me to discuss in this video, and there is a lot of it. So I'm gonna try and focus on what happened this year without info dumping a decade of history. But Drake and Kendrick Lamar have had a beef brewing for years, almost a Cold War that went hot. They came up as rappers in the early 2010s around the same time. They were collaborators at first, and both came into their own as megastars around the same time. But the last time they worked together was over a decade ago. And the whole time since, they've been subliminally dissing each other in ways that become much more obvious in hindsight. And earlier this year, in a seemingly unrelated event, Atlanta legend and rapper Future dropped a collab album with legendary producer Metro Boomin, where every feature on the album was hidden in the first 24 hours, so it was like a fun, ooh, I wonder who's gonna show up on your first listen. And naturally, it caught everybody by surprise when Kendrick Lamar showed up on one of the songs, and for the first time in a decade, just took really explicit shots at both J. Cole and Drake about how he was just a better rapper than them, and it set the world ablaze. The song went #1 for like 3 weeks. Everybody was talking about it, but as far as responses go, it was pretty quiet for a while. People were in a frenzy on the trenches of Twitter, but it took J. Cole surprise dropping a new project called Might Delete Later, ironically, and the last song on that project was a diss track on Kendrick Lamar. It was surprising to see him to be the first one popping out, especially because when you listen to the song, it did not really sound like he wanted to make it. This is literally a lyric: I'm hesitant, I love my brother, but I'm not gonna lie, I'm powered up for real, this shit would feel like swatting a fly. And then 2 days later, J. Cole did indeed delete that track from Spotify. He apologized live on stage at his Dreamville Festival, a show I actually went to and was mobbing to J. Cole songs at, but I missed the highlight of the whole thing because I had to pee really bad, and I just knew I wasn't gonna get my place in the crowd back, so I decided to go home after that. It was an L, but probably a necessary one to take. About a week later, on April 13th, is when Drake's own diss track allegedly leaked. No one was sure if it was real at first. It like had this weird AI timbre, it was very badly mixed, but he was swinging on that thing if it was real. Like, he was putting up a fight. He was sending disses to Kendrick about him being short, which is objectively funny. I'm sorry, as a short person, I like short jokes. But around this time, everybody decided we also hate Drake, and he was taking shots at basically anybody who had anything to say something about him. It was a genuinely convincing show of force. Like, he's holding his own against this many guys? That's crazy. Next, he dropped a track aimed at Kendrick Lamar specifically called Tailor Made Freestyle, and he used an AI Tupac and Snoop Dogg voice, the two West Coast legends, to try and get under Kendrick's skin, urging him to drop, insinuating he was a pussy for taking so long. However you feel about the ethics of that aside, I personally read it as a chess move to play mind games, but it doesn't seem like one that Kendrick took the bait on. That dude took his sweet time waiting another 2 weeks. I was biting my nails, man. I'm like, no, Kendrick, please drop. I can't be wrong. I'm not gonna lie, if you were a Kendrick fan, there was definitely like a moment where it's like, oh my god, what if he doesn't respond? It's like, what if he does wait till an album or some shit like that? But nah, he ain't let us down. It was a random Tuesday morning. On April 30th, Kendrick dropped his own 6.5-minute evisceration of Drake's character in the form of euphoria. He basically went at every public insecurity Drake has ever expressed or been exposed for. It was like vicious, but even then, he told Drake like, don't take it further. You don't wanna. Kendrick was all, I can get meaner, trust, and he wasn't lying. Kendrick drops another song 3 days later called 616 in LA, warning Drake that he has moles in his camp and that Kendrick knows shit about Drake. Drake doesn't know about himself. Drake, characteristically, does not listen, and he drops the track Family Matters the same day, calling Kendrick a wife beater and saying that one of his kids isn't actually his? He was saying some crazy shit on that, man. It was scathing. But in the defining "you just had to be there" moment of the year, less than an hour after Drake released his song, Kendrick dropped my favorite song of the year. A one-of-a-kind, emotionally haunting experience you have to mentally fortify yourself to listen to, Meet the Grams. In the song, Kendrick writes letters to each of Drake's family members, telling them everything wrong with Aubrey Drake Graham. All the following: he is allegedly a bad father, a deadbeat dad, he shelters sex offenders, he's a human trafficker, a pathological liar, addicted to drugs, alcohol, gambling, and gotcha games. Basically, if you name the character flaw, Kendrick was telling you Drake has it. This song is a one-of-a-kind deconstruction of a person on wax that makes you feel like you shouldn't be hearing what's said on it, and it kind of makes you feel like you're the one being grilled, like, shit, did I do that? And it kind of makes you feel like you're the one being grilled, like, shit, am I a deadbeat dad? And more importantly, dropping right after Family Matters, it completely stole the show away from it, took any traction that it had going. Most people who listened to this song thought, this isn't fun anymore, and so, of course, it was my most listened to song of 2024. I'm being so serious, I might just try and make a full video on that track because I hear it echoing in my head 8 months later and I can't stop thinking about it. But still, Kendrick wasn't done. The next day, he drops Not Like Us. I'm not even gonna explain this one to you. Certified pedophiles, A minor, yada yada yada, you get it. Drake dropped The Heart Part 6 to defend himself and it didn't work. Shit song, and the beef was basically over. But Kendrick was not done running that Zamboni back and forth over Drake's corpse. We're coming up on the halfway point now in June, and Kendrick has announced early that month that he would be doing a surprise one-off show on Juneteenth called The Pop-Out, Ken and Friends. It saw Kendrick doing his first performance since the beef with Drake ended, and it featured dozens of artists from the West Coast coming up on stage and just turning the Kia Forum into a goddamn mosh pit. Kendrick opened with Euphoria, he reunited with all his best buddies in Black Hippie on stage, and he performed Not Like Us 6 times in a row, one of which the crowd practically rapped the whole thing for him and he just let them go so he could catch his breath. Listen, we all know the NFL is not gonna let Kendrick say certified pedophiles on national TV, but he might get away with that A minor line, and the crowd can probably fill in the blanks. I was actually gonna go to the pop-out. It seemed like everybody was. Hell, even Ludwig from video games was there. I'd bought my tickets, booked my flights, booked a hotel, like I was ready to go, but I ended up skipping. And that's because of the most important thing that happened to me in June. I had my first ever gay wedding to go to, silly. It was in Montreal. You see, my friends Billy and Boo officially tied the knot and now suck face in a way legally recognized by the Canadian government. Technically, the wedding was a few days before the pop-out, so like I technically could have done the mad dash where the day after the wedding, I go to LA to try and make the concert, then I go back home to take care of the cat, then I go to LA a week later because it's VidCon. But honestly, that was going to be a lot of work, and I would prefer to spend those few extra days with some of my best friends and celebrating that special moment with them. Like, Kendrick is going to do more shows. There will be recordings of what the pop-out was like. Like, that is a unique concert and moment in time itself, but so is the wedding, and that is a one-of-a-kind thing in a much more irreplaceable way. I don't regret it for a second. But come on, you know me, I got my shit in. I may or may not have convinced the DJ at the wedding to play Not Like Us, and the way I watched the pop-out was by hanging out on the final night of the trip with all my friends who were also traveling there in a hot-as-hell Airbnb with broken AC, and just fucking jamming out to the whole thing. Short of every single one of us being there in person together, or just having working AC, I don't think I would have preferred to see the pop-out any other way. Moving into July, we are officially in the back half of the year, and it starts off with Kendrick dropping the music video for Not Like Us on the fucking 4th of July. I remember I was with Cotton at Anime Expo when I found out, and I looked at her with the stupidest fucking face like, can we watch the Not Like Us video? Yeah, we watched it, and I was basically glued to that shit, analyzing it for the next month. Not Like Us went #1 again because of that, and it felt like as soon as any conversation around the beef might be winding down, Kendrick would just pop up once a month to add more gasoline on the fire and get me locked the fuck in all over again. Now, for the major thing in July, if you have been a long-time Kwite viewer, one thing you'll know about me is that I cape pretty hard for Marvel movies, or at least I've held out hope longer than the average viewer that they would get their shit together. Don't worry, I'm down to the dumps with you all these days too. But in what I think might have been one of Marvel's smarter decisions in recent memory, they decided to only have one movie release in theaters this year, and it was a bombshell team-up movie, Deadpool and Wolverine. I fucking love this thing, and I can't help that about me. I understand all the criticisms about how it kind of steps on the legacy of Logan, it's super dependent on cameos, but despite all of it, unfortunately, this movie was focus group tested to appeal to me. Recently, in this shit show era of the MCU that we call the multiverse saga, a semblance of a plot has kind of failed to materialize, and in its absence, Marvel's biggest successes have generally been by digging into their bag of old IP and properties, using cameos and actors from old movies for big nostalgia moments and theater reactions. Spider-Man No Way Home brought back Andrew Garfield's and Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. The Multiverse of Madness kind of just threw a scattershot of random shit from other Marvel properties to create the Illuminati. We got Patrick Stewart Professor X, but he's in the Zambodi-looking 90s X-Men cartoon wheelchair. Captain Carter's here, total industry plant character. And also John Krasinski Reed Richards is here, since everybody fan casted him online. We'll give him what they want so we can kill him a minute later. And most recently, and seemingly desperately, they casted Robert Downey Jr. as Doctor Doom in the next Avengers movie. It is all a little desperate, but the truth is I'm not immune to this sort of thing. And how well the nostalgia bait works on me kind of varies. For No Way Home, Spider-Man is my favorite superhero, so I'm a little more inclined to like things about them. And I like Tobey and Andrew as Spider-Man, but unironically, it was just a better movie than expected. Andrew and Tobey were actually devices used to progress a genuinely Spider-Man story. There was really more going on there than just cheap cameos, and I'm glad there was, because I doubt the cameos were cheap. Whereas Multiverse of Madness kinda just shit the bed with me, man. I was most hyped at seeing Black Bolt, of all things, in this movie, because it was just such a weird pick to bring back. I've never even watched the Inhumans show, and I still perked up at seeing it. So Spider-Man nostalgia was tapped dry, but there was one last great well of oil that Marvel could mine nostalgia from me. When I was first getting into superheroes, Spider-Man was, of course, my first and favorite love, but I became equally obsessed at different points with some much shittier movies. The shitty part doesn't apply to this first one, the original X-Men trilogy, and the very bad Fantastic Four movies. You have no idea how fulfilling that Chris Evans Captain America fake out in Deadpool and Wolverine was. It was peak. I don't know what to tell you. And the weirdly compelling thing about this movie to me is how it works the meta real-world circumstances of its creation and production into the themes of the movie itself. Deadpool 3 was the last vestige of the Fox X-Men universe that basically crumbled to dust after Disney bought out Fox. It's just the leftovers that were left in the wreckage. And in the movie, Deadpool is told by everybody that he's a fuck-up and nobody's favorite. He's just like kinda side servings. The Wolverine he's pounding around with is apparently the lamest one of the multiverse, and even the choice of cameos in this movie was a bunch of misfit picks. The characters who show up are not beloved classics, in fact a lot of them are hated, or their stories are already well and done. It's even crazier that they managed to keep a lot of them a surprise. If you haven't seen Deadpool and Wolverine, check out now. You got Wesley Snipes' Blade, which was a genuinely fun trilogy of movies that unfortunately isn't talked about all that much now. You had Elektra from her failed 2005 spin-off movie. It was just genuinely shit. And lastly, you have Channing Tatum's Gambit with a thick Cajun accent.
Woo, I'm about to make a name for myself here.
Channing Tatum has been meant to play Gambit for 10 years. This is a version of the character that doesn't even exist. It's like not even really a cameo. It's a Deadpool 3 original. It's just a reference to the real world. Just tons of fuckers who were written off 20 years ago, and that it makes complete sense to see thrown out into the trash can of Marvel canon. These are not people with Spider-Man's fame. Sure, Hugh Jackman Wolverine is a big draw, but they made this one an alcoholic boy failure. We got Chris Evans back, but in a role most people forgot he played. Elektra was a straight-up disaster. Blade was meant to be getting a reboot with Mahershala Ali as this movie came out, so that thing's probably dead in the water, which makes the there's only ever gonna be one Blade joke kind of work more. The Fox universe, we know, is never coming back, and somehow Marvel actually finagled that into an honest-to-God celebration of the earliest years of Marvel superhero movies. The films that were made in the wake of Marvel being dirt poor and selling off their film rights just to stay afloat. And now that Marvel as a studio is on top again, sure, it may be a little cheap to use behind-the-scenes footage from those old movies of the actors being friends, but you know what? I'm still gonna cry about it. Fuck you. I was 5 when I saw those. Kevin Feige worked on a lot of those movies too, and Marvel wouldn't be around to have the success with the MCU it has without them existing. I'm aware that this movie really is sludge, but it's sludge finely tuned to hit me in ways that I get genuine emotional fulfillment out of. The deep-seated connection I have to some of these characters and seeing them get some form of a proper send-off before we move forward, it meant something to me, man. Alright, August was kind of a dry month for me, so I'll keep it short. The Marvel Rivals beta is weirdly a highlight of the year for me, when the normal Marvel Rivals doesn't make it on the list. The full game is obviously better, it's more fleshed out, and I can play with more people. And right now is when a lot of people people are getting that feeling of playing Overwatch in 2016 for the first time, but with Marvel Rivals instead. They're realizing, I can still feel this joy? The mantra of one more game and how good playing with a full stack felt creeping back in. But for me, I played the beta version back in August, so I knew I was going to enjoy the full game when it came out, but I had that magic awaken for me 4 months ago. It doesn't exactly happen a second time. I'm still playing Marvel Rivals, don't get me wrong. I'm still getting that feeling. I'm just associating the revival of that magic for me to earlier in the year. All right, we just speed ran through that on to September, and my God, do we have some ground to cover. Kendrick was again active early this month. On September 8th, he posted a minute-long video saying, "Hey guys, Kendrick here. I'm gonna be the first solo rapper to headline the Super Bowl. Okay, bye." And as if that wasn't enough, 3 days later, on 9/11 of all days, he drops a song on Instagram exclusively, and I adore this track. It's not a banger by any means, but it's got like a really haunting vocal sample, and Kendrick is rapping like he's in a dark room writing a manifesto about why he killed the politician he's about to assassinate. The room's only lit by candlelight as well, some shit like that. And on the track, he's talking about how the entire industry needs to be fucking destroyed. It's really something, man. I had that shit on repeat. It wasn't even like a Drake diss, which is like what most people thought of when they heard Kendrick dropped, and I realized I didn't care. I was just enjoying the music. I was successfully transitioning from more beef please to just wanting more Kendrick music, whatever form it came in. He could do a fucking Baby Shark cover, and I probably would have been all over that. But the most standout thing from September, though, was easily the release of my game of the year, Astrobot. I unironically collected every little freakazoid in that game in like one sitting. One straight session. I played a little bit on stream one night, then I pulled an all-nighter to keep playing it. If you don't know, Astrobot is basically Mario Galaxy 3, but if Sony made it, at least that's what I've been told. I have not played Mario Galaxy. I just assume that means good things. Regardless, Astrobot is a 3D platform starring the literal cutest guy ever, Astro, and the game is just incredibly tight and well-designed. Every aspect of it feels like it's responding to every minute action you take. And in my opinion, Astrobot is the only true PlayStation 5 exclusive. Not in the PS5 has no game sort of way, but in that you physically cannot make this game work on any other console. Not with a mouse and keyboard or even a controller that isn't the DualSense. The inputs you can do to make something happen in the game are incredible, and you can only pull that off with one of these fucking doohickeys, okay? I'm just being honest. Now, a common concern I've seen people express with Astrobot, with its dozens and dozens of cameos from other video game characters, is that it would just end up as like soulless ad corporate slop. And I get that fear. Astro's Playroom was literally a PS5 pack-in game, and this little guy only ever came about as like a mascot for tech demos. Every inch of the game is PlayStation themed, the spaceship you fly is a literal PS5 for Christ's sake, and there are full levels just based off Sony IPs. So I can understand the question of how is this not just one big ad? And I mean, like, it is that, but it's not just that. Because the way every character is included is oozing with love and adoration. Like, some of the titles they chose to add both in the base game and with content updates, they added fucking Gex! And none of the robots are called by their video game character names. They're just vague titles that reference something from their home franchise that you might only get if you've played them before. Every mascot bot has unique animations in reference to that source material. Like, the people who made this game over at Team Asobi were practically bleeding their love into this game to give it life and to try and make it a celebration of the art form they love instead of a more cynical affair. Pulling that off so successfully is a feat on its own, but the fact that if you removed all that, Astrobot would still be my game of the year is another. This lovingly crafted fan service nostalgia platter has been grafted onto one of the most highly polished and tightly designed games I've ever played. It just has the sauce. Speaking of good games, on to October. This year was the fearless year of Shadow, according to Sega. He actually has 2 entries in this video, second place to Kendrick Lamar. The first of which being his first dedicated game in almost 2 decades, Shadow Generation. I'll keep this part short because I already talked about my thoughts on this game and gushed over how they handled that character in a dedicated video. But to put it in perspective, the level of dopamine I've been receiving from Kendrick Lamar all year has been matched as a Shadow the Hedgehog fan in the last 3 months alone. And honestly, revisiting a lot of hyperfixations that have laid dormant this last year has done wonders for the sake of my Twitter For You page. Shadow the Hedgehog fan art and people taking their Shadow Build-A-Bear plush to random places is like so much better than porn bots and gore videos. Okay, on to November. And I swear to God, this is actually the last Kendrick entry on the list, but arguably it is the most substantial. On Friday, November 22nd, Kendrick drops a 1-minute video with a snippet of music on it. Me and my my friends are texting each other back and forth right away thinking, oh my god, it's real, the album, it's real, it's on the way! I'm like forcing myself to not watch the snippet because I want to react to it on stream, I want to theory craft and guess what it means for the release of the album. Yeah, all that went out the window when 40 minutes later, Kendrick's all, actually, here's the entire album. No promo, no rollout, no ads, just the whole album dropping on a particularly sunny Friday morning. With Kendrick's last record, Mr. Morale, I remember soy-facing for days as we were drip-fed information on when it would come out because I had to wait 5 years for that bitch. But even now, this year, when I've been eating good, seeing the album pop up on his Spotify page still feels surreal. Like, whenever he makes an album, it's like I don't believe it even after I listen to it, man. Like, it might just get ripped out of my fucking ears and memory at any second. And I'll tell you that Broccoli Snippet has lived rent-free in my brain ever since Kendrick put it in the Not Like Us music video. And that being the first song after the intro had me hyperventilating to the beat of the song. This part is definitely on some dork shit, but I have just been repeating quotables from the Drake beef all year, just random lines from Euphoria or Family Matters crawling into my head and forcing themselves out of my lips. But with this album, G&X, it's like Kendrick dropped a new care package of shit for me to stim with. Please allow me to read you some choice excerpts from the works of Pulitzer Prize-winning songwriter Kendrick Lamar. Bing bop boom 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 bop bam. I'm the type to cut my granny off if she ain't see it how I see it. What the fuck you wearing, bro? It's tacky. And last but not least, Mustard. Said exactly the way I pronounced it just now. I believe this is K-Dot's shortest album at only 44 minutes, but there is so much variety packed in here for how short the track list is. I think I'm gonna need more distance away from its initial release before I try to say where it ranks in Kendrick's discography, but I will say that next to Damn, this is easily the most re-listenable one. While I was traveling for the holidays, I would just pop in my earbuds and listen to this album front to back more than any other album I ever have before while traveling. And I mean, not as background music while I did my gay little New York Times crossword, just straight up sitting there listening to Peak. It was really good. So yeah, I do recommend this album, and to end this chunk off, I think it's worth looking at the insane run of tweets Kendrick has went on this year. There was no frills, no filler, just drops. Here we have diss track, diss track, diss track, I'm playing the Super Bowl, new album, stadium tour with SZA. That was everything he said the whole year. In one of the most dominant runs a rapper has ever had, Kendrick has said surprisingly little outside of the music itself, and it is a great time to be listening to the music. Now, for the last thing I really enjoyed this year, I have a late edition, Sonic 3, the movie, starring Keanu Reeves as Shadow. You guys probably knew this one was coming up, let's be honest. I don't think it's any secret, but Shadow the Hedgehog is my favorite Sonic character, and my long slumbering interest in him hasn't just been awakened as a joke. And I'm invested in how he's portrayed in media in a way I haven't since I was a child. Not to the extent of some Sonic fans on Twitter. The way they talk about the writing in the East versus the West, you'd think it was 90s rap beef or the Taiwan Strait. Just know that this shit means something to me, man. And really, a lot of signs were pointing to Sonic 3 being a slam dunk. Trailers were fun, Keanu wasn't doing a half-bad job, though that Shadow Generations level where he voice acts is another story. But we know Shadow gets the gun and the motorcycle, so the odds are looking good. Still, there is always a level of trepidation I get when I'm excited for anything. I'm used to the universe saying, nuh-uh. So I went to see Sonic 3 during Holiday Matsuri a few weeks ago, and it was a really special experience. It was a pseudo-private screening in that we bought out every seat in that particular theater so we could have the whole room to ourselves, and also specifically because we hoped a toddler would cry that they weren't able to get to watch the movie at that time. I guess it also came with the added benefit of being able to react to things as obnoxiously as we wanted, and my god, we took advantage of that. We hollered so many fucking times. I left that movie a changed man. Everything I'm saying was in the trailers, but whenever Shadow appeared on screen, soy faces all around. When Shadow got the gun, soy faces all around. When he got on the motorcycle, soy faces all around. There are a lot more moments I want to talk about, but I really can't without giving spoilers, and the movie's only come out a week ago for a lot of y'all. We're currently behind Mufasa in the global box office, so I need some of you non-Americans to step up and get those numbers up, but I'll hold my tongue on spoilers for now, so you're still motivated to find out what happens. You know, maybe I'll do a Sonic 3 Thoughts Roundup video on the third channel, Kwite with a Y, we'll see. And I will say, I'm very excited to talk about Shadow the Hedgehog even more, and trust, there actually is a point here. The last video I made was more around the actual in-game lore about Shadow and what I like about his character arc and like design inspirations, but I found myself on a journey to find out why does Shadow the Hedgehog love Latinas? You know, in like a meta way. We're exploring the shitpost angle of this character. Anyways, stay tuned for that, and I am absolutely looking forward to 2025. To anyone that's stuck with me over the last few years, ups and downs, I'd say it like every year now, genuinely, thank you for enabling me to do what I do for a living. I was thinking about this earlier today, but if 15-year-old me could see that I pulled it off. Little me would probably cry. Like, it just felt so out of fucking reach, and here I am, 25, and it's my job. I'm just trying to remember that and not lose sight of how fucking insane that it is I'm here at all. Anyways, this has been Kwite, and I'll see y'all next time.